And in many ways, I think speaking about Rumi and speaking about the non-sensory senses, I think first of all, he has done us a great disservice. Rumi has. Don't get me wrong. I think all teachings are good. We can all benefit from all kinds of teachings in some shape or form, whether it's to fix your relationship or fix yourself or fix your how you are at your job. These are all helpful. But the problem with Rumi kind of throwing all these seeds, out there, and for me to begin to kind of look at these seeds and my imaginations begin to blossom, and then I have all these ridiculous expectations that all of a sudden come to the surface, and I want to be those things. I think it's an unfair thing for anyone to do, and I'll tell you why. It doesn't mean that it's bad for you to imagine yourself, being great and understanding and imagining that Vok or this goddess is speaking through you. There is nothing wrong with any of those things. I have never had a relationship with any human being the way Rumi did with his teacher. Rumi knew Quran inside and out. I don't. Rumi had an entire city as his disciple. I don't. And when you know the Quran inside and out, when you have 5, 6, 1,000 disciples, there is arrogance inside you, there is pride inside you, there is hubris inside you, and your self-image gets really, really inflated. I don't have any of those. So when Rumi speaks about humility, what exactly is it that I'm losing? What exactly is it that I'm actually becoming curious about that, I dare to all of a sudden call humility? I'm just this lowly guy with nothing in my life. Okay, so I lose a penny. Losing a penny, sure, for some people, penny is a lifesaver, right? But what Rumi loses is basically just everything. But it's not losing his identity, his tradition, his heritage. He doesn't lose all of those things in a vacuum, in a black hole. He loses everything, but he finds his teacher Shams. He loses, but he gains. So he doesn't really even have a chance to, at least at the beginning, to have a chance to understand what depression really is, what grief is when you lose something. He's just having a good time in a room in darkness for a few months, a few weeks with his teacher. Nobody knows what they talked about. And then he suffers a loss, which is his teacher leaves him. But the problem with that scenario is that he's already a very mature man. He's a mature thinker. He can put his grief into a philosophical, poetic context. I can't do that. He can sit there and say, باز بانگی از نیستان میرسد غم به داد غم پرستان میرسد. Once again I hear the sound of the reed flute. It's filled with sorrow, and it's meant for those who worship sorrow. I don't worship sorrow. I hate sorrow. Sorrow makes me feel lonely. Sorrow makes me feel depressed. Sorrow makes me feel angry. Sorrow makes me feel abandoned. There are countless interpretations of Rumi's stories, Rumi's life, Rumi's poetry. There are tons of interpretation about, the non-sensory senses. Um, Unfortunately, they don't work for me. They may work for you, and if they work for you, I think you should hang on to them. You should keep them. You shouldn't listen to me, because what doesn't work for me doesn't mean it doesn't work for you. It may actually work for you. There is a verse in the one of the Gospels, I forget which, that do not store your treasures down here, because it is a den of thieves. It's where things corrupt and things just go bad. I doubt very much that if your body and if your mind and if your emotions and if your life is very, very, very physical, I don't think these mysteries, these things that are profoundly sacred, at least I think they are sacred, I don't think they're going to come and stay inside you to be defiled by you. I don't mean you, I'm just talking in generalities. um, it's kind of like having worked really, really hard your entire life and you have saved $1 million. The problem is your kids see the money, but they don't see the blood and the sweat behind it. They don't see a father who slaved away 50 years of his life to save his money. And all the father sees is that the kids come home, grab $20, go out there, spend it foolishly. And I assure you, there comes a point where the father says, I'm just going to hide my money. I'm not going to give my money to these kids. And the definition of love for this man begins to change. The definition of fatherhood begins to change. The definition of having a son or having a child begins to change. Because what's the use of having a child when the child is far too blind to see all the sacrifices that you've made on his behalf? I don't know again at what stage you will begin to see with the eyes of your soul, even if there is eyes of the soul. I don't know at what stage you will begin to hear that which can't be heard by the ear. I don't know. In one of the Hindu Upanishads, Katha Upanishad, I think, I suppose if you were to put these lines within the context of your question, it's kind of like that which the eyes see but cannot be seen by the eye, that which can be heard but can't be, I forget how it goes. Yeah, my long rambling to your question has a very short answer. First, I don't know. Second, even if I did, I don't think I'm talented and creative enough to tell it to you. Third, I think if you're very, very curious about the stuff, you really have to sit in the middle of nowhere for a long, long, long time. And it may be that you're gifted, someone up there likes you, and you don't have to wait that long. Sometimes I read the stories of these like giants, these thinkers and feelers of humanity. The one that comes to mind is like Saint Francis of Assisi. He comes from a very privileged background. Something happens to him in some battle. He comes home, he goes into coma, falls unconscious for a few days or a few weeks. He wakes up and is just a different man. He doesn't care for the riches of his father. Um, all of a sudden, his interest in women just completely vanishes. His interest in money vanishes. His interest in loving and caring and respecting for his parents vanish. Then he throws, his father's, he has a business, textile, he throws everything out the window. And when his father just doesn't know what to do with him, takes him to, the church, this bishop, and says, this guy just has no respect for me, I'm his father. And he takes off all of his clothes. He says, here, I'm no longer your son. These are your clothes that you give me. I no longer want them. And he says, I don't even want your name. I want to be called a beggar. If someone like that came to me, for example, I would say, listen, life is tough. Get yourself a job. Find yourself an apartment. Be grounded physically, because just in case you fall ill, no one's going to help you. Just in case you get kicked out of a place. Your flesh needs to be protected by the harshness of the weather. You need food. You don't want to go insane, especially in the 21st century. And I don't have any shame by saying that I lack a great deal of faith. If someone was to come to me and say, God spoke to me and I just want to be a wanderer, I would say, why? Why would you want to do that? You can have both worlds. And in many ways, I'm projecting my own insecurities, my own fears. But the truth is, I don't think it's a bad thing to do. Because you can't be in a state of expansion all the time. You're not going to be spiritually intoxicated all the time. There's lots of politics involved. And the truth is, I'm not Saint Francis of Assisi. I'm just a regular guy who's read some ridiculous books. And because I've been in the classroom for a couple of decades, I can speak relatively well. At least I hope I can. And so I piece these ideas together. Because if you have become like Saint Francis of Assisi, Stacy, where you're being governed by these other set of senses, someone like me could be poison to you, because I'm going to awaken you to the 5 physical senses that you have. Do not love everyone. Do not give your time to just anyone. Do not exercise compassion to just anyone. You're not 20, you're not 30, you're not 40. You'll get old. At a certain point, you're going to look at your life and you're going to have lots of regrets about the time you have given to unworthy people. Remember, do not store your treasures in places where things that you put will begin to rot. There was a episode in this TV show called Boston Legal. I'm not quite sure what season or what episode, but one of the main characters, Alan Shore, who's a gifted lawyer, really, James Spader. This woman had fallen in love with him. He had also liked her, not loved her, but liked her. And because of him, she kind of went a little crazy, you know. And so she ended up in an institute. And he was decent enough to go to the institution, talk to the heads of that environment, and convince them that there is nothing wrong with this woman. She just had, a moment, and now she's recovered. And then near the end of the episode, he looks at her and he says to her that there is nothing wrong with you. You just gave your love to a man who was undeserving of your love. And it's a very powerful scene that most often we give our time and our energy and our resources to things or to people who are unworthy. But you need to understand for yourself, first of all, the value of time, the value of energy, the value of youth. Because if you don't understand them, you're going to keep repeating until you begin to become aware and mindful, but it may be a little too late. You have nothing left inside you. But either way, good luck with all of that. I don't know. The story of Diogenes, told by Nietzsche and Rumi, it's a horrifying story. And let's just say Diogenes is a guy who now has access to these non-sensory senses. Broad daylight, 10 in the morning, the sun is out. Beautiful day. He comes out with a lit lantern, as if the sun is not enough, And when they ask him why, he says, the sun is not bright enough because people don't see. I think I need to bring my lantern. That you really need a lot of things, a lot of tools, a lot of training, a lot of maturity, a lot of experience, your ability to process the experiences, to really be able to see. It's kind of like Superman, where you get to see through things. Most of us just get stuck at seeing things. Superman not only sees what's on the surface, but also sees what's beyond. It's a very, very difficult place to be, and all of us have moments, where you walk into a gathering and all of a sudden you say, I just don't like to be around that person over there. You don't know how you know or how you feel or why you feel, but something about you says, don't go there. And you say, okay. Now imagine if you had that 24/7. First, it happens to us haphazardly. I don't know how it happens, how it comes about. But I think the statement in Meet Joe Black, where the father tells his daughter, is very telling, that, just be open. Lightning could strike at any time. At any time you could see. At any time you could smell. Not through your nose, not through your eyes. You could hear, not with your ears. You just have to wait. You know, Cassini knows this story much better than I. Jackie, forgive me for rambling on and on and on. You know, it's a story about this kid wanting to go to a party, and as he is walking, he hears this man giving a sermon, and he says, "Well, let me just listen to what he's saying," and he really, really likes what he hears. And you have an agenda, which is you want to go out there and have a good time. You want to go to a party and dance and drink and all that, and all of a sudden, the sermon just captivates you. I mean, with what ears are you hearing that all of a sudden all these desires vanish? You know, to the extent that he waits until the sermon ends and he goes to this man and says, "I want to be your teacher. I want to be your disciple." Sorry. And the guy says, "Really? Yeah, I want to be your disciple." "Okay, well then should I clean the bathroom for a while?" "Fine, I'll clean the bathroom." I mean, that in itself is complicated, you know. How could you, after an hour of listening to someone, fall in love with the person who has given this profoundly inspiring and moving sermon where you abandon everything about your life and clean bathrooms? I mean, have you no pride? Have you no shame? Have you no self-respect? Where you just go clean the toilets. And I don't know if you know anything about the toilets in the Middle East around the 8th century. They're horrifying. You know, you do that for like 2 years. And once in a while, just once in a blue moon, you're given permission to listen to yet another sermon. And the guy comes there after 2 years and says, "Okay, well, you've done a good job cleaning the bathrooms. Why don't you now clean the kitchen floor? Just mop it every night." You know, these other 5 senses in him, they have not awakened yet after 2 years of complete devotion to this man. Then another 2 years pass, and he says, "Okay, maybe now you can wash the dishes." Another 2 years pass, well, maybe now you can cook. Another 2 years pass, maybe now you can make tea. Another 2 years pass, maybe now you can bring the tea to the main hall, lecture hall, and just put it by the door. Another 2 years pass, maybe now you can, offer tea to our guests. Another 2 years pass, maybe now you can sit way in the back and listen to the sermon. Another 2 years pass, maybe now you can sit in the middle. Another 2 years pass, maybe now you can sit in the front. Another 2 years pass, and the teacher, looks at his disciple and says, "Don't let this guy in. Don't let him into the kitchen or the bathroom or the lecture hall." So he knocks on the door and says, "I'm here to listen to your sermon," and he gets beat up. He doesn't know what to do with himself. I mean, for the past 30 years, he's been serving this guy. And he doesn't have the eyes, he doesn't have the nose, the ears, the touch, the taste, to have those sacred senses guide him in his life. He falls apart, Stacy, because the law says far too great. He goes to the cemetery. He sits there and cries for hours. And he's just completely exhausted, and he falls asleep. And he has a dream. And in the dream, God comes to him. And the teacher, of course, tells his disciples, "Let's all light the candle and walk to the cemetery. It's time to celebrate." There are a few things, which is your devotion to someone is not really going to get you anywhere if you're looking for these 5 senses. I mean, it's necessary. These are things that you must do. And every time you do them, you hope that something will open and something will pull you upwards. And you'll walk in the Garden of Eden and God is right there talking to you, It's such a cruel thing. First, you fall in love with this guy you lose your physical life, then the guy manipulates everything about you, where you lose this other life as well. You neither have the old life, you don't even have the life you were devoted to for 30 years. And you're just as good as dead. مرده ام میروم بر روی خاک زنده گردان جانم ای جان بخش پاک. That I'm just like a corpse. I may be breathing, I may be walking, eating, but really there is nothing living inside me. It's just a cemetery, you know. And after 30 years, he has a dream, and it's powerful and it's transformative. And that kid, now a 50-year-old man, becomes a teacher. His name is Shah Shuja. His 5 senses come to life. You know, and that is what it takes. I think. Maybe someone like Eckhart Tolle has a shortcut. I don't really know. But I think it's important to approach these things with a good amount of respect. You know, I think there's a story where Yahweh tells Moses, remove your sandals. I think whenever you want to approach anything that you think is somewhat sacred, somewhat noble, always remove your sandals. Get rid of your judgments and ideas and thoughts about things. You know, get rid of your emotions. Get rid of your everyday language. Whether it's verbal language or bodily, just get rid of it. You can't understand Rumi the way you understand history or the way you understand biology or physics. It doesn't work. I think every branch of wisdom or every craft, if it's sacred enough, we need to remove the sandals. I may be a gifted pianist, but when it comes to violin, for example, I need to kind of remove the arrogance of being a pianist and have enough humility to kind of see myself as a novice when it comes to violin.